I'm going to paint a cow in colours hot and cold. The brushwork will mostly be big and bold. The reference photo is a cow from Spain, kindly provided by channel viewer Lorraine. From this image I've previously taken inspiration, but this time the watercolours I have forsaken. Instead, I'm going to use Acrylics Interactive, an efficient way to create a scene attractive. So join me as I paint a cow and landscape that look somewhat real, but rest assured there will be creative touches that approach the surreal. Now, many of you may remember the beginnings of this drawing that I showed at the end of the previous video, which used the same reference photo as inspiration. I have gone in now, and on top of the pencil marks that were there originally, I've just changed the size of the head of the cow and added an udder and the rear leg. Apart from that, I was fairly happy. And then I've pushed the mountains down in the composition, and I've put just a few of the trees in. I may add to those in a moment. But the idea is to have the cow among the trees, but to have an absence of branches around the cow's head, so there's a clear focus on the cow's head, and also, to be honest, to make my life a little bit easier in terms of painting. So I'm going to do this painting using my interactive acrylics, and I've got, so far, I'll probably add some colours to this as we go along, but this is Tinting White, Cad Yellow Light, Permanent Alizarin, Cerulean Blue, Ultramarine Blue, and Burnt Umber. I'm going to start with a 1-inch flat synthetic brush, and when I can get my water spray bottle working. Why isn't that working? There we go. Just get a little bit of water onto the paper. So it's my A2 mixed media paper, and then I'm going to begin by grabbing some of the cerulean blue, we'll grab a little bit of the tinting white. Let's get a good dollop more of that. And then I'm just going to take just a little touch of the burnt umber. Maybe just a little bit more. Just adding some water to the palette as well. And we'll begin by putting in a band of that colour across the top of the paper. I want to keep that paint fairly wet, so I've just added another dose of water, and now I'm just mixing in some more of the tinting white. Just grabbing a little more of the tinting white to put onto the palette. and adding some more of that to the mix that I had already. Again, we'll work our way from right to left. Add even more white now. A little bit too much blue coming through really off the brush there, but we should be able to compensate for that in a little bit. Just going to keep that paint nice and moist. And then even more white, so it's almost pure white now. I'm just going to pick up a little bit more of that burnt umber. And just a touch of the alizarin. And then bring that into the pale blue that I've still got there. And then what I'm going to try and do next is just using a clean dry, and this is a Sabline brush, I'm just going to feather the tips of that, if I just keep things nice and wet, feather the tips of that over the surface of the paint. To blend those different tones that I've got. So I'm just cleaning off that same brush with clean water and paper towel. Come down a little bit lower. And you can see I'm leaving some sort of zigzagged marks there because of the way I'm blending the paint, but I don't actually mind that. I think that's kind of nice. So we'll keep going with that. So back in with some pure tinting white. I want to really make the sky get paler as it goes towards the horizon. So that's starting to go in the right direction. But what I want to do next is move on to the distant mountains. So I'm going to keep that same brush going, but this time I'm going to pick up some ultramarine blue. Touch of the burnt umber again. And then I want to introduce a little bit of variation into the brush mark that I put down. So I'm just picking up a little corner, don't know how well you can see that, just a little corner of ultramarine blue on that brush. And then just get the paper wet there. And we'll start to put in the beginnings of a mountain. And then I want to keep that sort of subtle variation in brushwork going. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of yellow. And my hope is that when I put that on top of what I've just put down, that's going to give me a cold green, but we'll see what happens. It's not too bad. It's ended up a little bit bright up there, a little bit too warm. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of the ultramarine edge that was on the painting already. And that's worked a little bit better. So now I'm going to do the same again, but pick up a little bit more white on my brush. So what I'm trying to do is, rather than try and meticulously, bit more white, I'm going to grab a little bit of the alizarin now, just a touch. Rather than try and meticulously copy the texture and the features of the distant mountains, I'm trying to get my brush to do it automatically for me by mixing the paint on the brush and changing the colours that I put down with each brush stroke. Now, there you see, we've got, it's not really dry brush, but we've got some gaps in the brush stroke, but that's kind of okay. As it happens, they're mostly going to be hidden by the trees in a minute. But this paint I'm putting down now, we've got gaps in the brushwork, and that's okay for distant mountains. That's going to help me out really. I guess it's, a break in the paint is a better way to describe it. I'm feeling the need to break up that little band of green. Now, as we move down the hill, things do get a little warmer and greener. So I'm going to put a bit more yellow into that mix I've got going, but again, not too much. It's going a little dark now. So adding a bit more of the white. Could do with some more white in there. And again, I'm changing the brush stroke that I'm using. Let's get a touch more. Oh, that's way too much yellow, but we'll put it in. Perhaps pick up some cerulean blue this time. See what that gives us. So I'm changing the brush strokes as I move down the hills compared to on the horizon line as well. So it's just a quick, efficient way of making different sections of the landscape visually distinct. Now that section's come out a little pure blue, so let's just go back over that with the earlier colour. Okay, so we're starting to to block in different areas of the paper with different colours, but notice I'm keeping all of the colours fairly cool and pale. So now, as I come down to this sort of this kind of tree line here, which is down low, but it's quite a bit warmer, so we're going to go cerulean blue. I'll still mix it in with that kind of greyish colour I had before. We'll grab some of the cad yellow, some of the ultramarine blue. Let's get a little more cad yellow in there so we get it a bit more towards the green. Then I'm going to add a little mix of ultramarine, but I'm only mixing that on one side of my brush. And what I'm going to do is just kind of roll the brush across the surface of the paper in just a second. Let's get it a little wet though, and we'll see what kind of effects we get when we do that. Notice I'm completely ignoring my cow drawing, so I'm just going straight over the lines, and you know, I'm hoping that enough of that drawing will show through later. There'll be enough showing that I'll be able to follow my initial drawing and work out the bits that I have covered up if necessary. So I quite like that colour, but in general things change in nature as you move across the landscape. So I've just added a little cad yellow, and then I, to be honest, accidentally swept the brush briefly through that pale blue I've got there, but I didn't pick up too much of that. So what we'll do is we'll start on the edge there and roll that back and forth. It's not quite as fluid as I would like. Let's change our marks by rolling the brush up and down as we go left and right. And then switch the brushwork style again on the left hand side. Okay, so fairly happy so far. Let's grab a bit more of the cad yellow and mix that into what we've got, because we've got this foreground grass here. Again, going to get the paper wet. It's fairly damp already, but we'll keep it going. And by using this warmer, more yellowy version of green, hopefully that's starting to begin to bring the bottom edge of the painting, towards us. So we're trying to create an illusion of depth in a fairly efficient and at the moment very simple way. Now, what about these trees? Well, in the previous painting, if you remember, the colours of the stripes they basically mimicked the bands of colour in the landscape. So I can't remember exactly what it was, but I had a dark blue, a pale blue, a purple, I think an orangey brown, and then a green. And I was thinking I could do something similar with these trees. So I could start off with a dark blue here, and then later on I'll perhaps adjust those colours depending on how I feel things are looking. So what we'll do to begin with is just cleaning the brush a little bit. So we'll start with cerulean blue. Okay, so this is darker than I put down for the background, but I can use that applied quite thickly to begin to describe the silhouette. Of a tree. And by keeping the paint fairly thick, and applying the brush stroke kind of side to side along the branch, I'm getting a nice kind of broken edge, which I think is quite tree-like. I'm just trying to see where the line of my cow's back is, so I think I'm now at least well below it, so that's okay. I don't know, we could almost put that blue tree in front of the cow, now that I think about it. Well, we'll see how that looks a little bit later. Okay, so now that I've done that one, so I mean, this is, you know, it's a loose idea, so we're not going to mimic the landscape exactly, but I've got my blue here. Now I go to more of a purple. So let's keep going with this idea and take the cerulean blue and mix in some of the alizarin. So now I've got a purplish colour. So you can see as I move around this tree, I'm experimenting with the different marks I can make with this rather chunky flat brush. So for example there, just by putting the brush down, I got a blob of paint followed by a line. Here I'm using more of a dry brush effect. And you know, it's really nice to be expressive in that way, I think, rather than just colouring in the outline that you've put down with the pen or the pencil, whatever you're using. It's good fun, and in general I think it makes for a more interesting image if we let the brush do as much of the work as possible. Okay, so now, again, this is a very loose echo of the distant landscape. So I had a pale blue, then I came down to a purple. So blue in the sky, kind of purplish hills. Haven't mimicked it exactly, but I've done a darker blue here on the right. So going back to the stripes from the original painting, the vertical stripes, darker blue on the right of the tree, and a very much a bluey purple, but still a purple for this tree. So I'm going blue, blue, purple, blue, purple. Now I'm kind of breaking with convention a little bit here because these trees are obviously much closer to us than the distant landscape, but these are still very cool colors. But by making them darker, you can still make things seem somewhat closer. So moving down our landscape, we're going blue, purple. Now we're getting into the greens. So let's do something similar. I want to keep things dark though. I'm going to make this tree green to begin with. So this time I'm going to pick up the ultramarine blue, mix it into that green that I've already got. Let's add a little bit of picked up a bit of white there. That was unintentional. But I've added some of the cad yellow. We'll get some more of the ultramarine blue in there. And let's put a touch of burnt umber in there as well. And yeah, that'll do. So using this colour now to block in the third tree. And again, as I move around the tree, I can experiment and play with the different kinds of marks that I'm going to get by angling my brush. And making use of the way the paint breaks when I put it down thickly. And, if I'm painting onto the still slightly wet sky, then I get a bit of blending there as well. So all of that is introducing automatic variation into the textures and the marks that I'm putting down. Okay, so I have added some tube orange, cadmium red, and a fresh bit of yellow there. So I want to begin now by just blocking in the cow. And I'm going to start to do that by just grabbing some neat tube orange and using the same big brush. Block in the animal, and now this pop of orange I'm hoping is going to very warm color, very bright, not a million miles away. I mean, obviously it's not exact, but I'm just blocking in at the moment, so it's really going to bring our eye towards this animal, make it the focus of the picture, and that this warmth is going to be a big contrast to all the cool colors that I've got in the painting so far. Now at this stage I'm not worrying about whether there are little patches of white or where the shadows are on the animal. I'm not even concerned if some of the background shows through. As you can see on that leg, the paint's gone down a little transparent. The main thing is simply to get the big shapes in place. And then once this is all dry, I'll be able to move forward from there and refine things as needed. Now I do need to be a little bit careful for this next bit because I'm struggling to see my original drawing. Let's get a bit more of that orange. And then while I've got that on the brush, I'm now actually thinking, I wasn't going to do any shadows or anything, but I'm now thinking the most efficient way to do this is going to be to add some burnt umber to that orange. A little bit of the ultramarine blue. Now I'm going to stick with this big brush, get a bit of water onto the animal, and then just squint at my reference and, looking very much at the big shapes. Without being too fussy about things. Block in. This big cast shadow which we've got playing across the side of the body. I've done that rather crudely, really. I'm not sure I'm totally happy with it, but we'll keep going in this vein for now. Just adding the large shadow, or the largest areas of shadow, without overthinking it too much. And then if I clean my brush off again, and I'm just going to grab some of the tinting white that is still there on the palette. Again, keeping my focus on the large shapes. For the first layer of paint, I think I'm done. So what I've just completed is a relatively quick blocking in of a painting, but focusing on obviously the big shapes. And for the most part, I haven't really, there's a bit of an exception on the animal, but I haven't really worried about tone too much. I mean, broadly speaking, things get darker as we come towards the viewer, but in general, I've focused mostly on the temperature of the colour. So cool colours for the background, warm colours for the foreground focus. So I'm going to let that dry completely now, and then we'll see what we've got when things are completely dry, and then what I need to do to take things to the next stage. Okay, well, the painting's completely dry now, and it's actually been a few weeks since I painted the background and blocked in the cow. So I can't remember what I said at the end of the last video clip. But whatever I said, my plan now is to work up the animal to a more finished state. And then in doing that, I hope that I'll be able to see how much or how little I need to do to the background. So I've just refreshed my palette, interactive acrylics again. So I've got burnt umber, cadmium red, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, orange straight out the tube, cadmium yellow light, and tinting white. I'm going to use my little 1/2-inch flat brush and begin by just refining some of these colours to bring them a little closer to reality, but I'm hoping that some of that orange is going to end up showing through. So I'll get the surface of the painting wet with the water spray. And to begin with, I'm going to grab some tinting white. Now, if I remember correctly, I blocked in the cow just using orange, so I'm going to add a little bit of orange to that tinting white. But I'm also going to grab some of the cadmium yellow to make the beginnings of a highlight colour. Fairly happy with the way that's looking so far. excuse me. So that paler colour I feel has really added a sense of warm light to the animal. So just going to clean my brush a little bit. And then the next thing I want to mix up is kind of a purplish or bluish purplish shadow colour. So I'm going to grab some of the cerulean blue, grab just a touch of that kind of red, and at first glance I feel that's not too far away from what I want, so we'll see what this looks like. Now the shadows actually become a little greener up around here, but I'm not going to worry too. Maybe I will. Maybe I will. Let's put a little bit of yellow into that. It's not quite the right colour, but and then, although it's again not quite the right colour, just going to grab a small round brush and use that same colour on the horn that's on our left. And I'm really just doing this to block in the horn, and then I can add to that different coloured darks and some highlights as things progress. Not going to go quite so full on with the blocking on the other one, but I will just indicate that lower edge. So we've started to define the animal's head a little bit more, just making it stand out a bit more. Now I'm going to go back towards my, even though I mixed in a bit of that green, I'm going to just add a bit more water to that mix. I'm going to grab some more of that cerulean blue, I should say. A little touch of the red again. And this time some of the ultramarine. A bit more. Touch of the red. I think that's probably about right for what I want. Fairly warm day today, so I'm just going to keep the painting wet. So I'm hoping this is going to give me a darker shadow colour. And I'm hoping some of that warmer brown that I put down with the first layer of paint is going to end up showing through. But well, I'm not sure. I think the shadow's a little bluer than perhaps it could be. You know, perhaps ideally needed to be. If I was trying to represent the photo exactly, it would ideally be a little more to the red side. But as I often do in my paintings, I've deviated from reality here. And I like the way the blue and the orange, obviously they're complementary colours, so I quite like the way they look together. And also having this blue shadow kind of echoes the blues I've used in the trees as well. So I'm just going to use just the tips of the brush to feather some texture into that part of the animal, and we'll do the same there as well. So it's just a way of adding subtle little contour lines to add a little bit of surface interest to, you know, what could otherwise be just a big block of orange if we don't add anything else extra. And then a bit of artistic license, I'm going to use that to kind of create a bit of stray hair along the back. I've already got that kind of broken edge from the underlying orange, so if I keep some of that but then break it up a little with this blue, you get kind of a multi-layered effect, which I personally think makes for some interesting texture. Now then, let's add a bit more of the shadow down there. Now this rear leg is in shadow, but I'm going to try and stay, I want the focus of the painting to be on the head of this animal, so my plan is to, you know, work that area up the most and leave other areas rather less well finished. Fairly happy with that so far though. The next thing I want to do is add some of the patches of white on the animal, which I've already included in places, but I just want to add something other than the pure white. So this is tinting white, and I'm just going to grab just the tiniest touch of cad red to mix up a very pale pink. Now, I'm not really sure there's any pink in these whites in the reference, but I just kind of like the idea of including them. I haven't really used this colour much yet, pink that is, so it'll help just reduce the brightness of some of these, and I'm just interested to see how it plays off against some of the other colours that I've got in the painting so far. So now we've got quite a dramatic triangle of light here. So that's working reasonably well, I feel. So before I go over to the head and start working that up, I want to add some brighter highlights to the body. So again, I'm just going to, I don't know that I even need to clean my brush actually. Let's leave that pink on the brush, and let's leave that pink on the brush. I'm going to grab some more tinting white and mix that in. And just a touch of the, just a touch of the cad yellow. And again, going to wet the painting. Now that's perhaps a little bit too white, so I'm mixing in quite a bit more of the yellow. A touch of the orange. Let's see what that looks like now. It's not too bad. I'm probably going to lift off. I think I need to get a bit more water in the mix. There we go. So I've just cleaned my brush out, and I'm just going to go back through that rather solid patch of highlight to lift out a few bits. So it's just a little less, or a little more textured really. But at the moment, I kind of feel I want to let the animal dry rather more than it is. And once dry, I'll come in and work on the head and hopefully bring that to resolution. So while that's drying, let's take a look at the grass down here. So with that in mind, we're going to grab some ultramarine blue, put a touch of the cad red in. I'm mixing it in with that kind of greenish blue I had before, and we'll use that to just tap in some random texture with the end of the brush. And then having done that, we've already got a mid-green down there, so I'm going to go for some of the cad yellow, mix that in with the lighter colour that I just used on the cow. And I quite like the sort of quality of the colour, the sort of brush strokes that are still showing in the original green I put down. So I don't want to lose all of those. Now, this is actually surprisingly opaque. I thought with the tinting white it might be very, very transparent, but it's actually okay. So again, just using the tips of the brush to put in some grass. Let's just come in a little bit closer for you. Now, it's starting to get dry, the body of the cow, but in real life, the cow's got quite a lot of pale colouring under here along the belly. And I've also got an udder to put in as well at some point. So I think I'm going to deal with that first. I think the upper part of the rest of the body, I may not change much of that. We'll see how it goes. But I definitely want to put some indication of the paler colour in down there. So I'm going to try and use this patch of colour that I've got left that I just used for the grass. It's kind of the sort of pale highlight colour with a little bit of the yellow I used for the grass. And I'm going to add just a touch of burnt umber to that. I can get it, there we go. And we're going to use that as a base colour. That's working reasonably well actually. Just to get rid of some of that orange, and also I'm assuming if you shone a light on that part of the animal under the belly, it would be close to pure white, but it's obviously in shadow, so we don't want it to be too bright just there. I'm really enjoying the way that's working on top of some of the colours I've already put down. So I'm going to add a bit more of that where I can, where I feel I can get away with it. Put a bit up there. So that's not too bad. I'm going to mix what I've got left on the brush in with a bit of this bluer shadow colour. And use that over here, because now I realise this area is a little bit too light. We can use that to hint at the udder. And that's probably enough of that for now. Now I've drawn the outline of a bush here, which has got kind of an orangey brown colour to it. So I want to include that just to kind of echo the orange I've got here, because otherwise I've just got quite a lot of cool colours and then bam, warm orange. But I don't want the colour to be as warm as the cow. So what I'm going to do is grab a little bit of the orange, a little bit of the tube orange that I used before, mix that in with a bit of the burnt umber, but not too thoroughly, so there's some of the pure orange on the brush, a little bit of white, and then we'll see how well this works. I may end up scraping this off in just a moment, but we'll just kind of pop some of that in by rolling the brush, and that's going to allow me to hide that bit of line work that I did. Just pop a little bit down there. And yeah, it's just a little hint of colour, and that's working reasonably well. I think it looks more distant than the bright orange. So we'll take some of that colour and add a little bit of cad red. Touch of the white, and use that to add, just a base color to the nose. And then once that's dry, I think I'm ready to go in then and work up the head to its final state. So, what I've done is just used a watercolor marker to add some line work to the head. Now at the moment it's looking a little sort of almost like a childish illustration, I guess. But I'm going to kind of lose most of those lines when I add paint in a moment. But I just felt the need to do that to kind of see where I was going a little more efficiently. Made the horns a little longer, and I'm not confident the proportions are quite right, but nevertheless, that's the plan to make the painting more efficient. Okay, so first thing then with the horns, I'm going to come in with this dark blue mix I had from earlier, and we'll put a bit of shadow down the right hand side there. And also a little bit on the top. And then I quite like that base color I've got, so I'm going to leave that as it is, I think. But we'll come in with this kind of reddish brown that we've got from earlier and mix that in with a bit of yellow. And then I'm going to come in with pure white, so this is still the tinting white, which is somewhat less opaque. Somewhat less opaque than titanium white. So I may yet come in later with titanium white if I feel it's needed. And then we'll keep going with that pure white to hide some of these blue lines I've put in. And then taking that white, and I'm going to mix that in with some of the yellow, pick up a touch of the orange. And while I've got that colour on the brush, I think I'm going to add a touch of that there. I know the blue outline's showing through at the moment, but I'm not too worried about that just yet. Okay, and then back into the darker brown from earlier, or the orangey brown. And that is way too light, I now realise. So let's grab some of the orange, mix it in with some of this bluish colour. Go back in, try and fix that. That looks to be still too light. It's difficult to tell though, because the light, I think it might be the way the camera and the lighting is working. I think it is still too bright. So trying to remember what I did before. I think it was kind of a purple, wasn't it? So ultramarine, touch of cat red. Let's go in with that. That's a bit better. Probably going to have to come back in on that little patch at some point. But we'll take the opportunity to darken the underside of that horn. I need to let that bit I just put down dry a touch. But what I can do is use that same colour to pop in some nostrils. That one went a bit wayward. Grabbing a little bit of cerulean blue and mixing that with what's left on my brush for slightly paler shadow colour there. It's not quite the right colour, but for now I'm going to use that for the lower jaw as well. So cerulean blue, just a touch of that orange in there as well. And that's given me kind of a greenish colour, greenish brown, but I'm just going to try that for some of the shadowy colours on the right hand side of the head. And at the moment I'm quite liking that. So we'll blend that into the darker colours I had before. Okay, I'm going to take what I've got on the brush and mix that in. So I'm just cleaning my brush off. I'm going to mix what I've got left on the brush with some tinting white to give me an off-white. So the reference photo's a little bit bleached out, which is quite normal, you know, under bright lighting conditions. So I'm just going to, you know, have to do a little bit of an approximation here in terms of guessing what the tones are. And also just kind of choose to do what's right for my painting as well. So what I'm doing here is just kind of blocking in with this subdued tone so that I can then come back in with my highlights in a moment. I'm going to paint over that eye completely, not with a view to hiding it totally. I'll still be able to see where it is, but I think it's just going to be able to, it'll just help me paint the eye rather better in a moment, if that makes sense. Okay, good. So that's added a little bit more solidity to the head, I feel. And as I say, I'll come back in with some highlights in just a second. Just grabbing some pure cad yellow. Yeah, I think I've just realised I've made a mistake here. I think I've kind of squeezed the features together far too much, I think, on the brow. Not quite sure how that happened. I think when I added the watercolour marker, I must have got that bit wrong, possibly. So with that in mind, let's come back in with that kind of subdued green. I'm going to come down here and make that my sort of shadow region. And then come in with the lighter off white that I used before And I think that the forehead needs to, I don't know quite what I've done wrong. It needs to come down there a bit more, I think. So yeah, I think I'm just going to block that out and come back in and redo the shadows in a moment. I seem to have got the nose a bit pinched as well. I can't quite work. Let's kill all of that. Let's kill all of it. So go back to my slightly bigger brush. Just come in with some pure tinting white. See if I can just simplify the situation again. All right, well, that paint is completely dry and it's a few days later again. So my plan now is, if you've ever seen some of my portrait painting videos, then what I usually do is use my interactive acrylics, a lot of wet in wet, a lot of soft edges, and the tinting white. But now what I'm going to do is come in again with the interactive. So broadly, well, same colours as before, except instead of tinting white, this is titanium white. So now I'm going to use these more opaque colours to add a little bit more of a sense of light. To this cow, and also, you know, add a few more details and any other little finishing touches that I feel just might generally enhance things. So I'm still referring to my reference, as always, but kind of doing my own thing here and there as well. And I always try to strike a balance between, you know, describing the animal somewhat accurately, and then, but also interpreting it in my own way in terms of the marks that I put down. So there's some of that going on as well. I'm not copying the colours exactly. I'm not copying the highlights exactly. Now I'm just pondering. I think originally I had this tree coming in front of the animal, and I quite like that idea. So I think I'll probably come back to that in a bit and put that that tree back in front of the cow butt there. So I'm fairly content with that addition of the yellow. So now just switching to a round brush, and I'm just going to grab some pure titanium white now and use that just to put on a few of the very brightest highlights. And I'm being careful to try and make each mark count, in that I'm trying to vary the type of mark that I put down. If I can, I'll have that mark describe the contour of the head in some way. So for example, a little curved highlight here and here and here. And I'm using it sparingly, because if I put too much of the pure white down, then it will lose its impact. It won't seem as bright anymore. Now, while I've got that white on the brush, let's just get a touch of water. Going to grab a little bit of cadmium red here and mix up a pink, and then go into that pale yellow I had. And I I think that was on camera. Yeah, I think it was. We'll use some of that around the nose there. And then I can probably, again, if I just get a little bit more water, go back in there, mix in with a bit more of that yellow. I could probably use that for this little part of the lower eyelid, which is catching the light, and then the same colour for a little bit of the lash, which is catching the light. Now when it comes, I want to put the other eye in as well, but obviously that's very much in shadow, so I'm going to go back into that same colour that I had, but go pick up a little bit more of the cadmium red, and this time I'm just going to grab a little bit of burnt umber, maybe a touch more, just to create a more subdued version of that colour. And so there's the eye, the other eye's round about there. I think that could, with the tilt of the head, that could probably do with being a bit lower, so I just wetted my finger and lifted that bit of paint off. So I think it should be more down here. Still not in quite the right spot, I don't think. Perhaps a bit too far to the right. Try it again. I'm going to make it a little bit darker this time as well, because that colour was showing up a little bit too bright, in my opinion. So still fairly bright, but I think that's a bit better actually. That's working rather better in terms of position of the eye. Now we need to just clean the brush a moment, and I'm going to go back in with pure titanium white. Just bring that, just change the shape of that eye ever so slightly, and then obviously I want to put a highlight in the left eye, so it's such a bright scene, or bright sense of light coming from the left. I think I'm just going to put a touch of pure white in that eye, and then there isn't really a highlight visible on the other eye, but I will put one in. But what I'll do is I'll take that little bit of white that's left on the brush and mix in some of the cerulean blue. And that's going to give me a much more subdued highlight there. And then I'm going to come back in with my burnt umber. Bit of the ultramarine blue. Bit of cad red. And what I'm going to do is use that to just bit more shadow around that eye on our right. I think that works. I think once that's dry, that will work rather better than it was a moment ago. Okay, so the next thing is the belly of the animal. So this is a little bit of artistic license I'm about to apply now. So the belly of the animal is obviously fairly pale, as I think I mentioned earlier. I've just realised what I'm going to do. Again, a little bit of artistic license here. Just pure Surreal. Just going to put a little line of blue on the underside of that nostril there. So pale here, but because I've got green grass below, I want to kind of just hint at a bit of the reflected green on the belly. So what I'm going to do is take my cerulean blue, a little touch of the cad yellow, a bit more of the blue, we'll grab a bit of ultramarine blue as well, and we'll see what this looks like when we put it in. And then, having done that, I'm going to grab a touch of the yellow, mix that into the green I've already got, and then within that little line of green, just put in a few little touches. So at the moment, if I just pull the camera back for you, at the moment I'm kind of feeling that I don't need to do too much more to the animal, because although it's far from refined down here, I think it has sort of a spontaneity and freshness in the brushwork that I don't want to risk losing, certainly not at the moment. So so let's leave that as it is for now. We'll switch back to the flat brush. And what I'm going to do next is, I ought to look back at the footage, but I'm pretty sure this is pure Surreal, although I must admit it doesn't look like it, does it? So if I put that on neat, oh, maybe it is. It's one of those optical illusions. So just bringing that tree through there. And then the next question is, do I need to do or want to do any more to the trees? So again, let me pull the camera back a little bit further again. So obviously the trees are painted very simply, really. And the question is, do I want to do any more, as mentioned? Now, in the original reference, not that I feel the need to be tied down to that at all, particularly. In the original reference, there isn't a lot of detail. They are mostly in silhouette. There are regions which are, being hit by dappled light, which I've sort of hinted at with these gaps in the brush marks. Part of me wants to add more to them, and part of me wants to leave it alone. So for that reason, for now, I'm going to leave it as it is. I may come back and tweak the trees, but I think on the whole, I'm happy with the way this painting's turned out as is. It's kind of taken on a life of its own in a kind of a cool, almost spooky kind of way, because it's sort of a spooky forest with these weird colours. But I really enjoyed the experiment of using the kind of the stark contrast in colour temperature. So I've managed to keep the animal very warm and bright orange, and then everything else really is quite cool in colour, especially the background. And so, yeah, I think we'll call that one done. Hope you've enjoyed watching this little demo, or it's been quite a long demo actually, but hope you've enjoyed watching the video, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks very much for watching.